All right. Hello and welcome to Backstage with Gig Performer. I'm Brett Pontecorvo. We're here every Thursday, and I'm pretty pumped about today. So we've got actually just so many awesome people. I want to do a couple of shout outs here. We've got Michelle, which I've been working on this pronunciation, who's actually coming on next week. Fantastic coder and doing some really cool things in Gig Performer. We've got Gig Performer team member Nemanja Pudar. If you are reading any helpful articles on our website or basically doing anything that you have bumped into him, Kunst for Life, previous guest, this is Harry. So glad that you're here. Corne, you're here every week, man. So glad you're here. Thanks for being with us. And welcome, Neil. Haven't seen your name this recently, but so glad you're here as well. So here at Backstage, every week we're talking about all things Gig Performer, how we can use it, and how we can really own the stage, things that we can do to get the most out of the software. But we have a really interesting episode today. I'm super excited about. We've got special guest Eric Netherland, who's about to be coming on to talk about just what is possible. Like, what is possible if we reimagine instruments in the world where we have technology that's really come a long way. We have tools to generate sound inside of a computer. If we scratch much of what we're already familiar with and we think outside of the box, what is the fullest possibility that we can arrive at? And he's answered it with a really cool MIDI controller. If you are watching right now, can you let me know, are you using an MPE capable MIDI controller of any type? Are you using like a Rolly C-board, something that is giving you a bit more expression? Eric actually mentioned a couple of other ones that I'm blanking on, but if you're using one of those devices and you like it, let me know. I'd love to just out of curiosity, like who is doing that right now? Let us know in the comments. All right. I'm going to welcome our guest, Eric, on. We have so much to cover today, so I want to make sure we don't run out of time, but I'm going to be watching. So if you do put in the comments, let us know what devices you're using, because I'm actually very curious. So without further ado, welcoming to the Backstage with Gig Performer live stream, Eric Netherland. Eric, thanks for being with us.
Hey, Brett. How you doing, man?
Doing good. Doing really good. It looks like it might be early for you.
Indeed, yes. Yeah, it's not exactly musician hours.
No.
But we will press on.
Pressing on. Dave Bolden is using a Rolly C-board block in the studio.
There you go.
There you go. But we've got Michelle here who's never used one. Before we dive, this is like a massive just hole of opportunity. But before we go there, can you bring everybody up to speed? Like, who are you? What do you do? What did you do in the past? Like, bring us up to the nail.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've covered quite a spectrum of musical related gigs over the years. No surprise, I'm a keyboard player. In my early days, back in the day, I played in bands and I made a living playing music.
Yeah,
like many of us have. And I used a MIDI controller when MIDI started to work, mid 80s. I'm giving away my age a little bit.
Sure.
And I even played guitars, and I thought they were great. MIDI was great, and I used it. And but even then, there was a spark of well, it could do more. I felt like synthesizers were amazing, but the controllers weren't letting me do all the things that I thought it could, even that long ago. Then over the years, I got into all kinds of things, sound design, recording engineering. I did a little bit of producing. I worked in a studio for a while. So I guess my inner geek was coming out.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely. And even being a keyboard player in general, and then dealing with MIDI, and you're exposed to a bit more technology than maybe other instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And so years went by. I eventually got a gig at a company called Gulbranson. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. They used to make pianos and organs. It's in San Diego, California. And they hired me to create a General MIDI kit when General MIDI was kind of a new thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody remembers the Roland Sound Canvas was like the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sound cards were in computers.
Mm-hmm.
And MIDI was fairly new. This would be in the late 90s. And this gig exposed me to real engineers writing code and inventing chips. So we worked on a chip that had a General MIDI kit in it that was put into millions of laptops.
Wow.
And for a company called ESS. And that exposure kind of created a bridge. Because now I was around all these engineers. It was like a real job, but I was doing sound design. So, and at some point I had this thought, hey, maybe I'll just check out this software thing. I didn't think I would like it. But it turns out the software is a lot like composing music. It's a lot like notation. And I do also write music. So I thought I'd give it a try. And I kind of picked it up on the job. So over the years, I became a software engineer. Lo and behold.
Well, okay, just for clarity's sake here, you became a software engineer by watching other software engineers and trying to copy them and learn. Is that what happened?
Sort of, not exactly. I was around all these brilliant guys who were also musicians, by the way, because it was like a cool team of hardware and software engineers, and they also played music. And I was more the professional musician guy, but I felt like I might be able to figure this out. So I bought a book, and I told the guys, hey, they actually told me, hey, if you want to keep working here, you're going to need to branch out into other things. And so it was an interesting kind of changeover. Like I thought I would give it a try, and I started playing around with it, and they would give me projects. So I would do these little software projects plus my sound design. And then over a period of a few years, I got pretty good at it. I got good enough at it.
Right.
And then I had the title of, this other company bought us, like, it always happens. National Semiconductor. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that company. I think they're owned by Texas Instruments now. So Texas Instruments bought us, hired us, and I had the official title of software engineer. Wow. This was like this second career.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And so that went on for a while. And then when that ended, I actually applied for jobs. And during the time I worked, by the way, the Gulbranson, when we were working for National Semiconductor, we were doing audio for DVD audio. I don't know if anybody remembers that. There was a period of time where I was getting into this very high-end audio with a lossless compression. We were one of the first companies to do that. So I was writing audio code as well. I mean, we knew about MIDI and we were involved in MIDI, but it was mostly audio. And I worked with Dolby Laboratories to license some of our technology. And I thought Dolby was a cool company. So I, skipping a bunch of stuff here, but over the years, I eventually got hired by Dolby Laboratories, and I worked for them for a while. Wow. Yeah, I worked on Dolby Digital Plus.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember that being a thing. That was like my childhood. I remember like how that was massive.
Yeah, Dolby Digital was the thing for DVD, and then Dolby Digital Plus was the next generation of that. And I worked on that code. Wow. So I worked at Dolby, and then I worked at Divx, so a video company with doing audio and video. And then I worked at Deluxe Entertainment here in Los Angeles.
And this was all software jobs.
These were software jobs, yeah. But they were digital media focused. It was all digital media. So there was audio in there, but it was mixed together with the digital distribution, and streaming and all the things that we know and love today.
Michelle just wrote in that he worked for Super Audio CD. Philips and Sony.
I remember it. Yes, that was a competitor. To DVD audio.
Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Really, really cool. Okay.
Yeah. So that was my transition into this real world of a real job.
Right. And you got a lot of experience because you were doing projects and you had to become really, I guess you had to be good enough at it to do it professionally. So you became like the real deal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, not to trivialize it, that it took a long time, but
Yes.
yeah, eventually I got good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
I approached it differently because my first love and my first career was music and composition. And so I do, when I talk to my peers in the software engineering world, some of them approach software differently than I do because of my background.
Sure. AJ, who works with us on all of the social media stuff, I guess was working with Sony Media. I don't even know what the SACD stands for, but I guess he was a part of it too.
Yeah, Sony was there. Everybody was in the foray, which is really interesting because, there's all this super high end audio going on for these mediums, and at that time, the late '90s and early 2000s, and what eventually won out was exactly the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
What won out was MP3.
Yep.
So it went the opposite direction. People cared more about convenience and less storage space, and than they did the quality of the sound.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we could go down this whole rabbit trail, but it's
I know, forever.
so much to human nature.
Yeah.
Just in terms of like convenience.
It was MP3 was good enough, and
Yep.
and AC3 Dolby Digital was good enough, and now we have, now it's pretty good. I mean, perceptual audio coding. While I worked at Dolby, they sent us to a class at Stanford for perceptual audio encoding and decoding, and I got to know that stuff pretty well, and it's very interesting. You can fool the ear.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line.
I do remember listening to like something that was supposed to be the best audio as like a 10-year-old, and kind of silently in my mind going, I can't really tell the difference.
I mean, it takes actually Dolby had a team that I was on. I mean, I was writing code, but I was also on this tangential team at Dolby where 2 or 3 of us would go into a room and listen to all the different parameter settings of the latest generation of Dolby Digital, and just by ear subjectively pick which ones we thought sounded better for various types of music and speech. Wow. And that was a really cool thing that they did. It's a cool company because they understood that it's subjective.
Yep.
And but you can train, we all train our ears. We're musicians, right?
Yep.
And it's amazing what you can eventually hear if you practice. You can hear these little details, but most people don't.
Yep. Yeah, and it's also like so contextually driven because how in depth are you listening to a recording? Like, it's one of the like 1,400 jobs I do is teaching jazz, and we talk a lot about like intentional listening, and it's stunning to me how many people have been playing music their whole life, as hobbyists who have never like sat down and really tried to like pick something apart. Just the like super detailed listening. How much of like, information do we consume passively while we're distracted by other things? And like, what degree of focus do you need to even discern the quality of audio? After a certain threshold, it takes focus.
You're right. It's contextual.
It's so really interesting.
In your car, it doesn't really matter, right?
Right.
But when you're home and you have your speaker set up and you're listening to something, you really want it to be good. So
so I know this is kind of a hard shift here, but I guess in summary, you are a musician who became a software engineer, and so you have expertise in both areas. And would you say that's true?
Okay, we can go with that.
I think people will start to agree with me on my thoughts on that as we go through here. But you decided to address sort of the need that you felt years ago because you developed skills to be able to do it, which was that you felt MIDI could do more.
That's where it all comes together. I mean, my original seeds of the idea of a better MIDI controller was like I said, late 80s.
Yep.
And I continued to think about it and draw pictures, and I pondered it. And I thought, of course, like many of us did, like, somebody's going to do this. Somebody's going to make something that can break down some of these limitations.
Yeah.
And we talked about this before. I mean, MIDI, as amazing as it is, and how many of us use it every day, there were some things that the MIDI Association did not see through, all the way. And there were definitely some limitations to what a keyboard can do.
Yep.
And I mentioned this earlier when we were talking before, but Bob Moog made the most amazing synthesizer. We all know the Mini Moog, but it is a keyboard, so it had the limitations of a piano type instrument. And he put on a pitch bend wheel and a modulation wheel, and that continues to be the standard to this very day, 50 years later. So I was always thinking, through this whole career change from musician to engineer, somebody's going to make something different. And even Bob Moog, I've read that he was attempting to do a new type of keyboard, but it never came to fruition for some reason. I'm not really sure why. Maybe the technology wasn't there yet, So time went by, and there've been a few really interesting instruments that have come out. The Madrona Soundplane came out, which is more of a guitar type. I'm not sure if anybody's ever heard of that one. Of course, the Hawken Continuum. That's been around maybe the longest, and it can do slides and vibrato. And so it broke down some of those barriers, but it was very expensive, very heavy, and had an odd feel. And the keyboard was not really a keyboard. That he changed the interface so that as a keyboardist, you don't really walk up and just play it. You have to wrap your head around it. And that seemed to be a problem for me anyway. And then, of course, you mentioned the Rolly Seaboard. That's one of the latest ones. And then there's the Linstrument.
Linstrument. That's the name I was looking for at the beginning. I want to address something that I just kind of noticed is, so we, the journey is, what do you do with sound after it's been created? That's the journey. And how do you do it? And as you were talking, I noticed the, sort of inseparable connection to our physicality. Like, as you're explaining what the instrument is capable of doing, you're showing, perhaps because you're involved with it, but you're like showing the way in which your body interprets how the sound should be manipulated, which I feel like is key here. Like, you are showing me vibrato with your hand. So,
when I was playing, I've seen other keyboardists do this.
Yeah.
When I would play and I would hear the vibrato in my mind, and if I were using both hands, I couldn't go to the mod wheel.
Yeah.
Or even if I was on the mod wheel, sometimes I would just move my hand in that way it just felt right.
Yeah. And so much, it's interesting you brought up the mod wheel, because like a mod wheel can produce vibrato, but it doesn't feel like vibrato.
No.
Right?
It's an extremely mechanical
Yeah.
Way of introducing something that is so not mechanical, right? And
Yes.
so personal.
And
so I have to create a low frequency oscillator at a certain rate and depth to produce this articulation that I would just do so naturally with my hand. And all guitarists, of course, and string players do this.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
And that's like I guess the history. I think about this all the time, is like the journey of like the digital realm for us as creators is a journey back to the beginning, where we're manipulating real things and the result feels organic, like a string player or like
that's the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really natural for bands like Kraftwerk and Devo to sound robotic and techno. Right?
Yeah.
That's great. And synthesizers absolutely lend themselves to these kind of approaches. But why not have the other side as well? The organic side, as you say.
Yes.
That's what I was missing. I felt like it was missing. And I thought, oh, this is going to happen. This is going to come out. And, nothing ever did. So that's, at some point, it just dawned on me, I have the skills to do this myself.
Yeah. Now, there's an important thing, though, that happened, maybe perhaps in conjunction with this, is that regular MIDI didn't handle some of the stuff that you are dreaming of, right? So there was sort of the like MPE thing
Well, that was the big hurdle, right? That was the big hurdle that we could talk about.
So what is it? Like, what is MPE? Why is it profound? Like, what ability does it give you as a musician that you didn't have before?
Right. So one of the deficiencies, because I think MIDI, just like the MIDI Moog, was a little bit skewed towards the keyboardist and a keyboard type instrument that does not have the capability of bending individual notes.
Or altering them at all.
Well, except for polyphonic aftertouch.
Yes.
Right. So they did think of that, because there was this concept of by time MIDI came out, somebody had thought of this idea of aftertouch, where you can press harder on a keyboard. That's become a standard. But MIDI thought, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could do individual notes? So they did write in the specification originally, back in the 80s, polyphonic aftertouch, where you can press one key and it will do some continuous controller, but the other keys will not. So you have this individual, which is great, but is expensive in the hardware. So it was really rare that hardware keyboards would even support this feature. I think over the years, I've owned one instrument that could do it. And I wonder how many people,
it's
even
also
know what it is.
It's also like not super, like you really have to work to get that thing in your hand. Like aftertouch feels like not supernatural to me anyway. And they create it sometimes just across the board, right? Like certain keyboards, it's just like aftertouch on one key is aftertouch on all your keys.
Well, that's a separate feature in MIDI. Gotcha. So there's channel aftertouch, which is what you're describing. And you press on any key and they're all going to be, which is exactly the way pitch bend was written. Pitch bend is a channel wide feature in MIDI specification. That's the only way it works for all these years. So you had polyphonic aftertouch, which was really rare, unsupported by most hardware. And then you had no per note pitch bend at all. Wow. Simply did not exist for decades. And that was the big hurdle for this idea of having vibrato, because, and even when you use the mod wheel, you get vibrato on all the notes. That's just the way it
can be weird. Not always weird, but it can be weird.
It can be weird. It works. We've gotten around it. We're used to it, but it's really not right, because that's not really as musical as it could be, or it really should be.
Yeah.
Right. And so MPE was an attempt to address this deficiency in the original MIDI spec, because eventually enough people complained about it, I guess.
Right.
And people like me were inventing instruments that we figured out, well, how can we do this? Well, to make a very complicated thing sound simple, when you play the keyboard, if you're using a keyboard type instrument, each note you play will send on a separate channel. And that's the gist of MPE, that every note is on a separate channel, which then allows it to be manipulated somehow, pitch or vibrato or anything else individually, without all the other notes going along with it. And
it becomes infinitely more, I guess, infinite more possibilities open up to you when you have control over individual notes.
Oh yeah. Surprisingly, you think of the vibrato as an obvious thing, and maybe movements like a steel guitar can do. Pedal steels have all these pedals, and it's a very complicated, difficult instrument to play. With an MPE instrument, if it's done right, those types of movements can be much, much simpler. Then, since I've released my instrument to the world, people have come up with ideas I didn't even think of. So I don't even think we scratched the surface with what could be done with this MPE idea.
Yeah. So the one, those types of movements can be much simpler. So sorry, I think I've lost you. Are you still here, Eric?
Yeah, I'm still here. Did you
not? At some point I got like double audio, and that was very disorienting, and I totally lost my brain. But now your audio is normal. So this is the beauty of live stream.
Yeah. So here we go. This technology is great, isn't it?
Technology, we have the ability, and there was one important kind of partnership that was the bridge to making the the big unveil, the moment we've all been waiting for possible, which is at some point you got connected with the guys at PianoArc.
Right.
And
So yeah, that's
what's
right.
going on there? Give us kind of the
Yeah.
yeah.
This is where I literally quit my job, my day job.
Great.
And I thought, you know what? If I don't do it now, I may never be able to do it. Because I thought I have the skills musically and technologically to maybe build my own instrument. And I had this idea, which eventually became the Netherblade. And so I quit my job and I said, I'm going to take a couple years and I'm just going to see what happens, if I can make this happen. So, you know, way too much to talk about, but getting the right parts and testing and prototypes and blah, blah, blah. I was doing all this stuff. And to circle back to this Gulbranson, there's this guy, Dave Starkey, who used to work at Gulbranson with me, who's a hardware guy. And he got connected with PianoArc. Yeah. So they came to him to make this thing work for Brockett Parsons, who's the keyboardist for Lady Gaga.
Yes.
He wanted this circular keyboard. This is his thing.
Yep.
And Dave Starkey was part of the team to make this thing go.
Yep.
And he's a good friend of mine. I contacted him during this sabbatical I was taking, this musical sabbatical. And I said, I'm building this thing. What's going on? I might need some circuit boards, because he can actually design circuit boards, which is not a skill that I have.
Yes.
And so I needed that for my instrument. And so he told me he's working on this circular keyboard thing. So I went over to his house. This is all in San Diego, California.
Yeah.
And he showed me this thing and I was like, whoa, this is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And he actually, I think if you go down to the bottom of the first page of their latest website,
like the home page.
Yeah. The homepage, you can see the latest version of it now. And it might even see.
Is it this guy here?
Oh, no, that's from the Super Bowl. That's a Gaga show. This is still the team page. Anyway, there's one picture that has the FSR sensor on it, the XYZ pad that I designed.
We had to do some digging to find this last time.
Oh, there it is, I think.
Is it this guy here?
You can see it there. Yeah. See, there's 4 of them all around.
Yep.
That's the latest version of the keyboard. It has 4 XYZ pads, one for each section. And so I designed that because Dave's question to me was, where do we put a pitch bend wheel on the circular keyboard? And I was working with these XYZ pads and touch sensitive technology.
Yeah.
So I said, hey, why don't we put a touch screen, not a screen, but a touch sensor all around it, all the way around the circle.
Yes.
And he thought that was a great idea. So he started to build the hardware for this. And I wrote all the firmware for that. And then we eventually came up with an agreement. Hey, let me help you with the software on this keyboard, and you can do a circuit board for me, for my instrument. And that's how that all started.
Yes.
So I became a co-owner of PianoArc, and we worked on that off and on for many years. And we still work on it sometimes. It's a very expensive keyboard, but it looks cool.
It does look cool. And the touch sensors are kind of, groundbreaking a little bit, right? I mean, like, it gives you a lot more control. But this partnership, this is what made the way to bring your Netherblade into existence.
It did. I needed circuit boards, and that agreement with Dave provided me that piece of the puzzle. Finding other parts was a huge, another story we probably don't have time to go into, but finding the parts and getting everything hardware wise was a big challenge for me because I'm a software guy.
Right.
And so PianoArc was a big help in that regard. And we went to NAMM with it and people thought it was cool. It's really just a MIDI controller in a circle, but the XYZ pad is somewhat unique. Most keyboards don't have that. And even if you do find a pad controller, it'll be X and Y,
right,
but not Z, which I'm not really sure why, but that one has all 3. And I also have that same technology on my Netherblade.
Yes.
And
which we have on the screen right now. You can kind of see up here at the top, this guy here, this is the XYZ pad, right?
Correct.
So the Netherblade looks awesome.
Well, thanks.
How do you describe, like, when you tell people about the Netherblade, what do you tell them? Like, how do you describe what I'm looking at right now to them? What does it do? Why is it awesome?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, the thing we've been talking about, it will do per note pitch bend.
Yep.
And it's very easy to play if you're a keyboardist. And because it's software, I can change the interface. It can also do guitar.
Yep.
And I will be adding more interfaces as time goes on. So you've got the two basic, most popular type of musical interfaces, a keyboard or a fretboard. It can slide. It feels similar to your iPad or your iPhone, but it's long enough to be musical.
Yep.
An iPad, you could do the similar thing with an iPad, but it's just too small, in my opinion, to really be able to stretch out and do anything. Matter of fact, I would like to make the Netherblade even longer if I could find parts.
So anybody watching out there who's capable of making parts for a longer screen, this is our official call.
Yeah. And touchscreens and displays in these unusual configurations are difficult to find.
Yes. Yeah.
That was a whole story in and of itself.
Yes.
And but the XYZ pad I designed completely by myself, and all those parts are custom. Matter of fact, much of it is custom, almost all of it.
Yes.
And so the pitch bend is on the right hand or left hand if you're left-handed, because you can flip it.
Yep.
And so one hand is all pitch, which is note on, independent pitch bend. And then the XYZ pad is pretty much everything else you can imagine. It can do continuous controllers, up and down, aftertouch, key switching, and you can use it to switch in and out of other interfaces. And so that's all the other things which you would use for, you filter cutoff or whatever.
You were showing me this at some point, which I guess we'll get to that part, but you can also use it to articulate things.
Yeah. Do you want to take a look at it now?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Let me
make
you bigger. Hold on. Yeah, sweet. All right. So here it is in real life.
Sort of. In real time.
Real time.
That doesn't look too bad.
Yeah, I think it looks great.
Yeah. So here's a demonstration of just independent pitch bend.
Yeah. Yeah. So much as possible. Okay, awesome.
So as you can see, the pitch bend is completely independent. It can do anything, and then vibrato is very natural. And you can change rate, and you can change depth completely organically. And it's interesting when I watch other people play this. It will sound different. And that was really my goal. Was I wanted to make something that has so much expression naturally that two people playing the same synth sound would sound different.
Yeah.
And so your hand actually becomes part of it. And of course here, I just got a silver cutoff on this XYZ pad. And there's many, many, many things you can do with it. Let's see. Let's do something different. How about, so, I've got octave buttons. You can do all the same, mod wheel stuff and pitch bend stuff. But, you can do like,
yeah, so it feels like you're playing what you're playing. Like the sound that's coming out organically reflects the hand movement that you are doing to create the sound.
Right. It's funny because I'm playing it now with through this whole system with this live streaming, and it's a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, it is different. The anybody who's streamed audio live knows that it is.
Here's a good example of
I love the backwards interface on that. That's very cool.
Yeah, so the nice thing about the software interface is I can change the colors. I can make it look different for different sounds. So you can get a lot of
Yeah.
sounds.
Oh, wait, can you come closer to the mic? I didn't hear that what you just said.
Oh, I'm just saying you can get a lot of different sounds by combining the XYZ pad and the pitch bend. It kind of becomes really infinite, and it's also percussive. So you can re-trigger. This also has velocity sensitivity, so you can re-trigger. It's kind of fun. You do percussive stuff.
Yep. So if you are trying to replicate the sound of a plucking string, that becomes actually very organic. Somebody just wrote in, is there a special software needed like Roly to have access to all the features?
That's the most perfect question.
And also, when you move further from the mic, it's harder to hear your voice.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
Let me just raise it. It's easy enough.
Yeah, there you go. How about it?
How's that? Better?
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So now you can see this, and you can hear me. Hopefully,
that's right.
So this is one of the best things about having a software interface has a lot of advantages. As you can see, I can change colors, and you can see that the keys change color. And I don't know if you can see there's a graphic that follows my fingers, and it just makes it look cool and it's fun while you're playing. So while you're playing, but it can also switch into the parameters.
Yep.
So it's upside down, but all the parameters for changing how your controller connects with your synthesizer, whether it's MPE or not, or whether you want a fretboard, which I can show. So I can also change it to a guitar interface. It's upside down though, because I can't see anything. Yeah, so they can also do a guitar interface. For guitar players, it makes it more, obviously easier for guitar players to play it like this.
Yep.
And so all the way you can change the continuous controller for the XYZ pad, what the pressure does, whether it's velocity or not, whether or not it automatically corrects your notes. It's got auto note correction, so you're always in tune if you want. The key switches, which notes, so you can switch in and out of things like what I'm doing here. I'm using a key switch. This is a sample of a guitar. I can hit a key switch and make it go into harmonics.
So the needed software is all right on the instrument.
Yeah, so you don't need any other software with it at all.
And
as a matter of fact, you can actually load plugins internally. This is an unusual feature. I did this earlier, actually. It has the full operating system. So you might recognize that.
Ha! Wow.
You can, in fact, put Gig Performer right on the Netherblade.
Ah! That is insanely cool.
Isn't it? I couldn't wait to show you this.
Wow. Okay, so Gig Performer is installed on your Netherblade.
In fact, it is. Yes, I made sure and checked it last night because I oftentimes use it as a MIDI controller on an external synth, which is what I'm doing this morning.
Yes.
But optionally, it has audio out.
Wow.
I don't know if you can see that, but it has audio out. You can load plugins directly internally, configure it with Gig Performer like we all do, and just plug it into an amplifier. It'll work just fine.
Wow. I mean, that's kind of another level. Never seen anything like that before. It's kind of blowing my mind.
That was exactly my goal.
Yeah. Wow. Really, really cool. So, gosh. So, yeah, I'm like, I don't even know. I'm a little bit speechless here. What, I guess having it all inside your instrument is really nice. Then it's like your computer and your instrument are all in one package, and
Yeah,
it just works.
yeah, it does work. Now, there are some limitations. This is a much smaller
Yeah.
CPU than the most monster game controllers,
Yeah.
powered laptops.
Yeah.
So if you want a lot of really high powered sounds that require lots of CPU,
Yeah.
then you'll probably want to plug it into your external synth or your external
Hmm.
laptop or your desktop computer.
Yeah.
But if you are doing a gig and you don't want to bring a computer, you have a Netherblade, you can do all these cool things, all these bends.
Hmm.
And it works great.
Hmm. Hmm. Fascinating. So, how did you end up choosing Gig Performer to host your stuff? Like, there are other options out there. Why did you pick Gig Performer specifically to host your sounds when you're not running something directly on that? Like, how did you end up finding this software, and why did you end up continuing to use it?
Yeah, several reasons. Brockett with the circle keyboard used MainStage.
Hmm.
And I'm a person I'm not operating systems focused.
Hmm.
I use Windows, I use Mac OS X, I use Linux. I'll use any of them. I'm not really, but a lot of musicians, I would say, we could safely say the majority of musicians use Macintosh, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So
David's
MainStage
shaking
was
his head no, but yeah,
yeah, and there are some people who are adamantly, won't do that. But because so many do, I felt like I needed to find out what the Macintosh guys are doing and make sure I'm up on that.
yeah.
Right. And so I checked out MainStage, and personally, I did not like it. I found it not intuitive. I'm a technical person, but when I'm working on sounds and I'm getting ready to play music, just like anybody else, I don't want it to be difficult to use. I want
Yeah.
to be able to get in and out and get the job done quickly and intuitively. And I just felt like MainStage was a terrible interface. And I also, because I'm a software engineer, I discovered bugs in it.
Uh-huh. Right.
Some pretty severe ones, in my opinion. And so I was disappointed, and I was looking for something else. And that one day at NAMM, we ran across Gig Performer, and we thought we'd give it a try. And I just immediately, my test is, can I in 5 or 10 minutes get up and running? And I was able to do that.
Hmm.
And it was just very intuitive. And then, since I started using it, I found that it was also very powerful.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I ended up using the monitor and a lot of the features for translating things in MIDI while I was developing this instrument.
Wow. Really cool.
Yeah.
So
And,
it was a part of your creation process for developing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought the MIDI monitor I've used many different MIDI monitors to tell me what the data is, and which is very important to me writing the code. And the MIDI monitor is really well done. It actually told me what was wrong in a way that made sense to me and helped me fix bugs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Yeah.
So what is, I guess I feel like there are two holes here that we have to kind of go through. The first is like, what type of instrument can support MPE? And the second is, how are you using Gig Performer with your Netherblade? I was watching you play, and other people couldn't see it. It looks like you are perhaps sending program changes from your Netherblade to switch rack spaces. I could be wrong about that, but
you're correct. You are correct. If you have that on the screen, if I change to some other sound that's supported. What's going on? I'm having fumble fingers right now.
Oh, it's okay.
I don't know why it's not switching. There we go. I should have changed something.
Sweet.
Yeah, pigments, but I wanted to change to the violin. There we go. Okay.
So
the violin's really cool. I mean, the violin. Make sure this that's right. Yeah, I think it's right. I think it's 24 notes. There we go. Mm-hmm. So, you know, with there's a lot of setup involved, and I've been playing around with these things, and I left it in the wrong setting. But you have to match up the pitch bend setting from the Netherblade or any MPE instrument with your synthesizer. That the pitch bend range has to be matching.
Yes.
And it's funny, MPE supports this. I don't know if anybody knows about these non-registered parameters, NRPNs, but these are like advanced MIDI stuff where it sends the pitch bend range to your synth, but most synthesizers don't support it.
Gotcha.
You know, it's just one of these things. So you have to be a little careful. But so, you know, the physical modeling is good for violin type stuff, cello.
It's really cool. So are you, for this one, are you just using the MIDI-in blocks to create a split? So part of your Netherblade's a violin and part of it's a cello?
Yeah, this is a relatively simple setup.
That's great.
In many ways, you know, now that I've got everything working, I'm just using Gig Performer to switch sounds so that when I demo it, I can switch to different sounds and show people different features.
Yeah.
Yep. And but for MPE, that's really the thing that's worth talking about a little bit, because MPE is not supported by the majority of plugins. I have to do some jumping through some hoops in order for certain synthesizers to work the way I want them to work.
Gotcha.
And so there's 3 different types of synthesizers in my world. There's the one that supports MPE. And for example, Arturia Pigments is a plugin that supports MPE. And that one's really easy. I can just go to that, set it to MPE, set the range, and it just works. And I go into my parameters here, and I set my instrument to MPE as well.
Gotcha.
It has an MPE switch on it, you know. And then if I'm MPE mode and the synthesizer supports MPE correctly, that's the simplest way to get all these features. You get the per note pitch bend, everything just works great. But what about synthesizers that don't support MPE? This is where Gig Performer really came in handy.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So if your synthesizer is multi-timbral, let's go back. Let's go to one of those. You might even open up the so this is the electric guitar I was playing before, is a contact. I don't know if people are used to contact, but contact.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So people who know contact know that there's a lot of power within their little world, their little contact world. You can load in all their supported synth plugins. And so within this world, I can load in multiple synthesizer instances, but it's not MPE. Right. So then I got to go into my little parameter thing and tell it to be what I call multi-channel. So it's kind of a way to hack an MPE type configuration, because I get all the individual channel. Each one of these instances of this plugin are on a different channel. Gotcha. And so it's a little more work, but you can kind of construct a semi-MPE thing. Okay. But the controller, and this is the cool thing about MPE, not only does it facilitate this pitch bending thing, but MPE also has this concept of a bass channel manager channel. Okay. And what that means is when I do continuous controller on my XYZ or mod wheel or whatever, it sends on one channel, but all the notes respond to it. Interesting. Okay. Right. So that way you don't have to send multiple channels of all this data of continuous controller stuff to each note. It gets really, it kind of overloads the data bus. Gotcha. And so I have a mode that does send all the channels out for things like contact, for things it's like not MPE. So I do have to do that. Right. So somebody just wrote in, and I feel like this is key to call out. Actually, it doesn't have to do with what we're talking about, but Michelle, who will be with us next week,
says the lack of physical keys doesn't seem to hamper playing it.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's so many things.
Yeah.
So this actually is a great question because I did apply for a patent on this thing.
Uh-huh.
And the patent has to do specifically with the fact that if I slide to any note, black or white, from any other note, it's in tune.
Mm-hmm.
And you might seem like that's an obvious thing, but a keyboard is a very oddly configured thing. It was not designed to do this kind of sliding.
Yeah.
But as keyboard players, we're all used to that. So my idea was I make exactly the same length and width, black keys and white keys, as a standard keyboard.
Yep.
That way, and I've tested this at NAMM shows and trade shows. Any keyboard player can walk up and play a scale instantly. It's not hard to play if you're used to playing a standard keyboard. But you can also just move from one. And it's in tune.
Yep.
That actually was tricky to get right. And that's what I've applied for a patent.
Oh, sorry. There's, I think, an auto adjust on your volume when the like.
Oh, now I got to move my mic back down.
Yeah. StreamYard is like saying, oh, all of a sudden you've started talking much louder because your voice now StreamYard thinks is an electric guitar. Anyway, as it goes.
Yes,
but...
yes. I don't know if anybody heard what I was saying. Like maybe you guys missed that, but so this in tune with a standard keyboard is tricky to do with pitch. So it's actually much easier to play than you might think, even though it's perfectly flat.
Yeah.
Now, if you're not looking at it, if you close your eyes, you have to use your ears. And it's kind of an interesting thing that instead of feeling the keys, you listen to it, because you can actually, if you hit a wrong note, so to speak, you can just move to it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find it by listening to it. So I think after a little practice, anybody could play it pretty quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It seemed, as you were playing it, I guess you probably have spent some hours on it, just a couple, but as you were playing it, it seemed very natural.
Yeah, I mean, the trickiest bit is switching from one sound to another. Obviously, if you go to a violin sound and you want to sound authentic, that requires some practice, because violin is a very precise type of sound.
Yeah.
But if you're doing synthesizer stuff, it's wide open. You can just go crazy.
Yes.
It's a lot of fun.
Yes. So this particular mode that you were demoing before we kind of chatted about this is the hack version of MPE, and you have created within the software of the Netherblade a way to make this work.
That's right. So if you choose not MPE, you choose multi-channel, and you have an instrument such as Contact, you can create, or any instrument that has multi-timbral, you can create 5 or 6 instances on different channels, and it'll work the same way as MPE exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So now the third and most interesting way, and I may not have this set up right because of StreamYard. I may not have done this correctly.
I can probably help you with that if you're in Gig Performer. We'll find out.
Maybe we can fix it. But the pedal steel, let me get the pedal steel. The problem with being upside down. Yeah. Okay, so here's my pedal steel.
Okay.
Sound.
Yeah, we can hear that.
Okay, cool. Cool. Seems to be working.
Yeah.
So I've got I've got volume. Let me stand up again real quick.
Sure.
So that's showing a lot of different kind of independent pitch bend that would be very difficult to do on a real pedal steel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Why are there so many instances of your lap steel? Like, what are we looking at here? And what is your
So this
what's
is the
happening?
complicated one. This is the one that's the most difficult to create.
Yeah.
And because this plugin, which I really, really wanted to show a pedal steel,
Hmm.
because obviously it's a cool way to demo my instrument.
Yeah.
When I purchased this Ample Slides lap steel plugin, it doesn't support MPE and it doesn't support multi-timbral. So this is the third and most complex way to hack MPE. But
Okay.
with Gig Performer, and this is one of the reasons I use it, it wasn't that difficult to come up with a way to do it.
Uh-huh.
But I had to use multiple instances of the input. So you can see this is set to channel 1.
Yep.
And then,
Oh, wait. Did that?
wait a minute.
I don't know if I
see
can.
that.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, you can see that. So,
Okay.
and the second one here is set to channel 2. Let me open it. And the third
Yeah.
one,
And
channel
for those
3,
of you who
etc.
maybe don't know what he's doing there, so like the MIDI-in block, he's not just taking 2 and sending it to 2, he's also blocking the other channels. So only channel 2 is passing through that MIDI-in block, which if I'm correct, Eric, that's how you're achieving the different channels specifically, as each one is passing through only one channel. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So you can see that I've checked, and this is the second one. So
Uh-huh.
this is channel 2, and all the other channels are turned off, or
Yes.
filtered out.
Yes. Which
So
otherwise
now
this wouldn't work.
it wouldn't work in the way that MPE does.
Yes.
Now you can also play the Netherblade in single channel mode, but then you're kind of back to standard keyboard,
Right.
meaning that if you bend one note, they're all going to bend
Yes.
together like a whammy bar.
Right.
That's pretty much what we've had all these years.
Right.
But so if you want the independent pitch bend, which is definitely a core feature,
Mm-hmm.
and you have an instrument, a plugin that doesn't support multi-timbral or MPE, you can still do it with Gig Performer.
Mm-hmm.
And this works just as well as any other.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to create multiple instances of the input
Mm-hmm.
and the plugin, and yeah, it works great.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think we get this question or comment often enough, which is like, why does each MIDI-in block only do one thing? Which that's maybe not even the best way to phrase it. But the reason that the MIDI-in block is so modular in nature is because having it be like this makes things possible where you're able to really isolate each individual element. It's the reason why if you want to do a key switch or a keyboard split, each MIDI-in block is doing a single section, because you may want to control many parameters within a single section, or in your case, have different channels going to different instances of a particular instrument. So it becomes very powerful.
Yeah, indeed.
This is insane. Actually, this is just maybe for those who haven't seen it. Can you open the MIDI monitor and just kind of maybe show people what that is if they haven't used it before? So MIDI monitor is a included Gig Performer specific MIDI monitor. So if you have Gig Performer, you have this, and it runs inside of Gig Performer. But Eric, when you play a note, it just shows all of the messages that you're sending.
There's a note and then pitch bend, and then if I do 2 notes, you'll see. Oh, this is the MIDI monitor only for the first one.
Gotcha.
So you're only seeing the channel 1 stuff. But you can see it also sends continuous controller. So you can see I'm moving this up and down. It would do aftertouch if I had it enabled. There's all that pitch bend just to do vibrato, and then it's interesting. Another thing is like this playing on a flat surface is fast. There's no moving parts.
Yeah,
it is super fast. Kind of a side effect.
Yeah, it's like tapping on a desk. It gives.
I like it personally because it's solid.
Yeah.
A lot of the other instruments that are doing similar things are cool, but the soft cloth or spongy feel is a little off-putting to me anyway.
Sure.
And it's all personal taste, but
I
think for keyboard players to try this, I'm getting great feedback. Even though it may seem daunting to not feel the keys move because we're all used to that, it's surprisingly easy to pick up.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the like final thing here. Well, I guess I have a couple more questions for you, but the first of all is if somebody's trying to get into MPE, they have maybe a controller that supports it. What synth would you direct them to first,
Well,
and why?
there are several. There are
Yeah.
several. There's one that Roger Lynn really, really loves, and I've been playing with it too. And it's free, and
Okay.
it's pretty cool. It's called Surge,
Uh huh.
um, and you can just download it, and it's open source,
Okay.
and it fully supports MPE.
Yeah.
And so, if I were just starting out and I want to play with it, can't go wrong with a free synth.
Yep.
Um, and so,
Absolutely.
a matter of fact, I may start bundling that
Hmm. Yeah.
with this thing because it just seems like a great place to start.
Yeah.
And the other one that I really really like is the one I've been playing here, called Pigments by Arturia, which is
Mhm.
a really nice synth. I mean, it does all the crazy modern sounds, and
Yeah.
it's really very powerful synth, and it
Yeah.
supports MPE very very well. I like that one personally.
Pigments is one of my favorite synthesizers to use. I mean, it's very hard for me to separate from Serum, but Pigments I feel like is super intuitive. The presets are also really good. Like if you
Yeah,
want to start somewhere and then tweak, if you're like one of those people where you're like, I need a close preset, like Pigments comes with a ton, which is really nice.
agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first question. The second question is if somebody is watching who is like, I need this instrument, how do we go about that? What's your process currently for selling Netherblades?
Well, it's very new.
Yep.
I've been testing it, and I've had it at several trade shows now.
Hmm.
And I believe very strongly that it's robust and it's roadworthy now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I am confident that it's sellable.
Hmm.
Um, the only thing is, I build these myself here in
Yep.
my shop,
Yes.
and so there are very few in existence. I'm
Yes.
currently working on building 3 or 4 more.
Okay.
So it's slow. The manufacturing is slow.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
there aren't very many in existence, but soon to be collector's items, I'm
Hmm.
sure.
Sure.
Uh, if somebody were to contact me, there's a email address on the website,
Okay.
it's netherblade.com. And at the bottom is info@netherblade.com. And if you send me an email and you're interested, uh, I can put you on the waiting list.
Okay. Great. And how long is that right now? Like,
Well,
what's
I
turnaround time
do,
for?
believe it or not, I have parts. I am building some right now.
Uh-huh.
So I will have some available um, probably by New Year, by the first of the year.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so if this is inspiring you in kind of a real way and you resonate with this, and honestly, I guess I'm making a bit of an assumption here. You can totally tell me no. But I'm like if you're purchasing the Netherblade now, you're getting kind of like you're an early adopter. So I assume you're going to be like chatting with people and seeing how it's going, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
assuming want feedback from
Yeah.
people who are taking them out. So
Yeah. I've only sold a handful,
mhm.
and it is, cutting edge, brand new stuff.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I'm keeping real close tabs. Updates and fixes will be free, and
Mhm.
you can contact me directly, and I would be very, very quick to address any questions
Yeah.
or any complications that somebody might run into when they're setting it up.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Okay. Yeah, awesome. I feel like, I'm hoping that this is just the beginning of what you're doing because this is really cool. Um it's really cool. So we're nearing closer to the end of our time here. I do want to do a final call though. So if anybody who's watching right now has questions for Eric, who is a master of many things. So, questions across the board here, like if you have stuff about his instrument, specifically about his gig performer use, about something in the software, whatever world, go ahead and pop those in there. And I guess, Eric, this is the question I ask everybody. But if somebody was just starting to use Gig Performer, They were brand new to the gig performer world. Is there any tip or bit of wisdom you would give them to help them smooth into it easily, or get started on the right foot?
That's an interesting question. I found it to be very, very intuitive.
Mm-hmm.
When I first opened it up, I think that I think with a lot of technology, the tricky thing is connecting all the dots.
Sure.
And no matter what you have, and I believe Gig Performer has done a pretty good job of this, is you have to have an audio interface.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have some type of a plugin.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding the concepts of these things, in my audio interface, my plugin, maybe a MIDI interface, maybe not, just make read up on it. I would say,
Yeah.
read the instructions, follow the tutorials, because once you understand the building blocks
Mm-hmm.
of audio and MIDI and plugins, when those factors,
Mm-hmm.
then I think Gig Performer is just going to be a piece of cake. Because you just piece those together, and that's what it does. It connects those dots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, awesome. That's actually super valuable. I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, Gig Performer is meant to be, it's a low entry point, but it's also extremely powerful if you're desiring to expand it. We did have one question come in from Glenn, who wants to know if you've ever built a breath controller, and if you have ever used have you used any of these other items here on this list?
I'm going to address the second part of that question first.
Yeah.
There is in fact an Arduino daughter board built into this.
Wow. Okay. Awesome.
And I use Arduino for the foot controller. We didn't mention it, but there's also a foot controller input for sustain pedal, continuous controller pedal, both.
Okay.
And obviously there's power and USB MIDI and old-fashioned old MIDI too.
Okay.
So yeah, Arduino, I use it all the time. It's great. And the first part of the question is a simple answer. No, I've never built a breath controller, but I've always thought it'd be cool to add that to this someday, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, thanks for that. All right, friends. Well, I'm like, if any other questions come in, we'll grab them. But Eric, I want to thank you because you shared just so much. I'm like, I'm going to personally go back and rewatch this episode because I feel like I got educated here. But thank you so much for being with us. Thanks for using Gig Performer. And for supporting us. And I hope this isn't the last time that we meet. So, but thank you so much for being with us.
Agreed. Hey, thanks a lot, Brett. It was really fun. Really fun chatting with you, man.
All right. So friends, for those of you who are watching, thanks for being here. Next week, we're going to be back with Michel. I'm going to learn how to say his last name perfectly for next week, but right now I'm not going to butcher it. Who's going to talk about how he's doing some coding to really customize the way Gig Performer's panels work for him, and also a whole host of other things. So we'll be back next week, same time, 11:30 a.m. Harry says congratulations. So yeah, have an awesome week.